Hello, packages, parsers, and programs. Today is 420, one of programming's magic numbers. It comes from the minimum size, 20 bytes, of an IPv4 packet. It's a nod to how allowing IPv4 traffic into your network leads to a feeling of paranoia. IPv4 has side effects that distort perception, hence its support for fragmentation. It may also lead to an altered sense of time and space, which is why we have UDP. And it influenced AppSec's 4-question, 20-minute threat modeling framework. So why not take today to sit down with some developers, start a conversation with what if, and think about threat-hardened code. And so this week we talk with Data Owen about what red team exercises can look like and how to use them to improve security processes. Check your packets and stay tuned for Application Security Weekly.
It's the show to learn the latest tools and techniques to understand DevOps, applications, and the cloud. Your trusted source for the latest AppSec news. It's time for Application Security Weekly.
This is episode 379, recorded April 20th, 2026. I'm your host, Mike Shima, and I'm here with John Kinsella. Hello, John.
April 420. Happy 420.
Well, starting early. That was perfectly done. We have here a returning guest. Gwyddon Data Owen is a retired Air Force cyber warfare officer who's been on the cutting edge of cybersecurity since 2003. He's Director of Cybersecurity and Technology for Universal Strategy Group. He spent over 20 years engaging nation-state adversaries across air, land, sea, space, and cyberspace, and has some NSA Red Team certs to go with it. Hello, Data. Welcome back.
Hello. Thanks for having me back. This is a true pleasure and honor to be here.
Well, it's a pleasure for us as well. And we wanted to have you back because last time you were on, you were helping defend Tennessee's critical infrastructure. And I think setting up Tennessee to be a leader of how to protect such things within the U.S. So we're talking about IoT and, well, I guess more industrial IoT than just little eyes. But we also wanted to hear about some of that red teaming work you've done. And I think part of my mind was thinking about this as we perhaps live in a world where lots of vulnerabilities are being discovered. Lots of organizations want to answer that question, are we going to get hacked? And red teaming, I think, is one of the ways to answer that question. But you're the expert here. So maybe you could start us off with perhaps even just some definition. What is a red team? How would you go about building a red team?
So a red team is there to emulate a specific adversary or threat. They're different than other types of teams that are there to merely find a way in. So let's say, for instance, we won't use any specific adversary names. So let's say the Kyrgyzstanis are going to, we assess that they are interested in our organization for whatever reason. So in which case I might commission a red team to come in and emulate their threat profile. What tactics, techniques, and procedures do they tend to use that are unique to them or are common for them to use? And what that does for us is it allows us to know when the red team comes through. I won't necessarily know when they're doing their stuff, but it allows me to assess how is my organization going to respond to a threat, how are they going to respond to things that seem off, and how is an adversary going to, of this type, how are they going to behave inside the network, what sorts of things might they try and do, what sorts of damage might they cause, and then what sorts of mitigations can we put in place to help prevent or at least detect so that we can then respond with as much alacrity as possible to a situation that might arise.
Zero trust is clearly the future as threats get faster, quieter, and harder to detect. But implementing it shouldn't disrupt the business. ThreatLocker enforces default deny at execution in a way that remains enterprise-ready, scalable, and operationally clean. Unknown software is stopped cold. Trusted apps stay contained, and drift is locked down across the environment. It's zero trust that works in real enterprises and prepares you for the threats ahead. See why CISOs are adopting it at securityweekly.com/threatlocker.
Part of that, I'm curious the skills that you bring to that table, because you're talking about emulating the TTPs of an adversary, but you also don't always necessarily know exactly what their skills are. And also, to be clever, to be smart about hacking, you can't just magically, we're not the Matrix, and you can't do the I know Kung Fu move of Keanu. And I'm going to guess that like a red team that you're putting together isn't someone who's going to be an expert on exploiting RDOS vulnerabilities in an NPM package. That those are not the types of CVEs that are getting exploited here.
Well, so it's going to wildly depend, right? Because if you, not to put too fine a point on it, I'm not calling anybody out on purpose. I'm using it solely as an example. If you're talking supply chain, right? So SolarWinds, right? If I have a threat actor who is targeting a company like SolarWinds, then they're very much going to go for supply chain, because that's where the gold is, right? And we like to think that we are far, far removed from things like hunter-gatherers. We're really not. The psychology is the same, because you go where the stuff you want is. If the herd went this way, you follow the herd. And in this case, if SolarWinds is the herd, then you're going to follow the herd. And you asked before, how do you get a red team started? Most organizations, in order to start a red team, if you're doing like an internal one for your organization, the way it ended up for me is first thing you need is buy-in from up top, because you're going to be doing things that are going to be unpopular, because you're going to be airing dirty laundry. And so you need that top cover. You need the authorization to go in and say, it is okay for you to lie, steal, and cheat. It is okay for you to, in some cases, break things. These are the rules of the road. Here is your 007 license to kill. And you need that get out of jail free card. Just like when people are doing pen tests for organizations and they want to have that get out of jail free card, that you want to have it in writing that says, these are the things that we have agreed upon, and this is the stuff that so-and-so is authorized to do. If you happen to catch them doing it, 1, congrats. 2, you need to let them go.
And that's
Please.
what I'd love to hear, to break down some examples you might have. Because on the one hand, you can have, you've got your 007 license, but if the red team wins because the planets were in alignment and the admin was having a bad day and they just clicked on a link, that's not necessarily like what I'm teasing out here is, can you learn from that in terms of, from a defensive perspective, to improve your tooling, improve your processes, or did the red team just get lucky because their job can be kind of easy some days and others?
Well, so here's, again, it all comes back to psychology. At the end of the day, when people have their lunch handed to them, right? Because that's inevitably how it ends up. And it sounds like a bad thing. It's actually a good thing, because would you rather have the enemy show you where your weak spots are, or would you rather have someone who is allegedly friendly show you where your weak spots are? I prefer the allegedly friendly ones, which is also why the top cover matters. So in our case, I started a red team on Andersen Air Force Base in Guam back in 2007-ish timeframe. And now this was not a very substantial red teaming activity. Really what it was PKI certs were they were just becoming a thing. We were still using like Office 2003. So this way back in the day. Yeah. This is back when macros were still a thing. I mean, you can still do macros today, but Office aggressively tries to prevent you from using them. And so what we did is we were trying to help educate, and that was really our job, was to emulate an email-based threat. And then if someone clicked on a thing and opened a whatever and ran a macro and blah, 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 we were going to just answer the clue questions of who did it, with what, and where, right? And at the time, I didn't even know that it was really called a red team. They just told me set up a phishing thing, right? And it was really red teaming because we were just emulating a phishing-based attacker. It wasn't a specific adversary. It was just a phishing attacker that was using macros as the exploit or the payload. So then we set up stuff that I didn't even know at the time was called a listening post for it to phone home to and provide that information. So it would gain execution, and it would then send stuff back to our central device to say, hey, we'd get the username that was active at the time and send that information back. And it didn't do anything else. It did have some checks built in to say, am I on an Air Force network? If so, I'll execute. If not, I'll terminate, to prevent some spread, which interestingly turned out to be somewhat relevant. If you remember a little incident that was it wasn't talked a lot about. Something happened in Natanz a couple of years back with a big, oh wait, that's what it was. It was Stuxnet. Anyway, so that got a little bit out of hand and spread a little bit uncontrollably. So it got them caught, which is bad for teams like this. So anyway, the top cover that I was talking about was super important because General Owens with an S was in charge of the base, and he would assemble his colonels and everybody else, his staff, once a week, and we would have a slide that he would show that said, here is by name, by organization, who clicked on stuff. And in an organization like that, public shaming is absolutely a thing. And these colonels that have been in the Air Force, 20, 25 years would cease to make eye contact with their boss, and they would just go, we'll fix it, sir. And that was way more effective than anything else that we could have done, because, it was some random captain that was doing it. And they're not going to listen to him, but they will listen to their boss's boss's boss. And what was cool about it, and looking for, when you go into red teaming, especially if you're creating one of the most important things that I can recommend is know what your desired outcomes are and then tool for that. And so in our case, it was, we want people to not click on bad things in their email. So what's a bad thing? In this case, if it's not digitally signed, because PKI certs were a thing, if it's not PKI signed by, and that signature checks out, then we want you to be very, very suspicious of it. So in this case, what happened was, when we started, there's a thing called the First Sergeant's Council. And the First Sergeants are the ones that help take care of our airmen when there are life events, as there always are, because people are people. So if, someone's going through a divorce, or their spouse died, or whatever else, right? And all the First Sergeants from all the units get together to help each other to help their airmen. The lead First Sergeant would say, hey, I'm going to send you all an email about this at their First Sergeant's Council. They would click send on the email. If it wasn't digitally signed, by the time we were done, they would all ignore it. They knew it was coming. It came from the right person. But if it wasn't digitally signed, they wouldn't open it because they were paranoid of their email.
Well, and that's what's interesting to me is what lessons we might learn from that or take away from that. Because on the one hand, I appreciate don't click on these links, download that malware, and suddenly we're in a ransomware environment. But on the other hand, that feels like we're putting all of this responsibility onto humans to not click a link, which you can go back to the RFCs and nothing about there's no evil bit for links, right? The evil bit is 3514. That's an April Fool's RFC, by the way. So I'm curious, I absolutely understand the fun part of that, the execution of that, but it feels like, how can you turn something like here are bad links into an organizational solution rather than making people paranoid when they might actually be missing important things, or that behavioral problems where technology is failing them rather than just, oh, it's a Monday morning, I got to click this link.
Well, so that's, again, it's back to psychology. So the question is, when we entrust people to drive a vehicle, what things are we expecting of them? And are we expecting people to use their turn signals? Are we expecting people to keep a reasonable following distance? Are we expecting people to not speed? Are we expecting them to maintain a reasonable speed for the driving conditions they find themselves in? And having grown up in Connecticut, I can tell you that what a reasonable speed is in snow is not the same thing as a reasonable speed here in Texas when it snows. The driving experience across the majority of drivers here versus there is somewhat different when it comes to winter weather. So my point is that when it comes to saying, hey, we're licensing you to drive, how about we're licensing you to use the equipment that we've issued to you, and we expect you to use it responsibly?
Yeah, and I think that's where then my mind goes to, did the organization set up their networks, their systems to be used to have that base level of responsibility where there's at least less of that decision making on the human? And here I want to pull in perhaps maybe some aspects of what you've seen through different red team exercises, in the sense of, I'm going to guess that it's a common cliche in AppSec, InfoSec, credentials are the best backdoor into a system.
Oh, I love credentials. They're the best.
Right. So if credentials are in, as you said up front, obtaining credentials doesn't sound like a red team exercise, because that's not really a target. We want to log in isn't your target. We want to log in and be able to manipulate the memory of the software being built during its CI/CD pipeline, a la SolarWinds, for example, in order so that other people download our backdoored packages. But that still comes back to credentials are king. Are there commonalities of your red team exercises, either how you get in or when you're delivering that final report as the allegedly, I'll keep that in there, allegedly friendly person explaining, well, this process could have been better, this process could have been better. What's common amongst those events?
So, well, one of the big differences between a red team and someone who's just like someone who's a bad guy, the reason I say allegedly friendly is because one of the things that a red team's job, in my opinion, is, and if you're going to hire one out or if you're going to commission one, it's super important that you make sure that this tail is on there, because if you're not making sure that the red team is also educating your population after the fact. When I served on the NSA Red Team, we would always do an outbrief. We would do an outbrief at the executive level and say, hey, so here are the things that happened. We would take out most of the techno jargon, and we would just speak to them and say, person to person, here are the things that we were able to do. Here is the actual impact on your organization. Then we'd also do a technical outbrief with folks and say, here are the answers to the test. This is exactly how we did it. Here's exactly how we got in. Here are screenshots of each of the things that we did. Like nothing, ask me anything on anything here, because our job is to help prevent the bad guys from winning. And it does take a little bit of, to be blunt, pantsing people to try and get them to do stuff. The sad thing is that in many instances, after serving on various red teams, we'll come back and do a second assessment on an organization, and we'll pull last year's answers off the shelf, dust them off, start on page one, and people will swear up and down, we're going to fix this, we won't rest until it's done, blah, 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 blah. And human nature, what happens? They have the exact same vulnerabilities. We can use the exact same playbook time after time after time. And so...
Long sigh, yeah.
Right, I know. And this is not a surprise to anyone here, but if you're going to commission a red team, the education piece is key, and the enforcement piece, where you say if they find things that need to happen and they have recommendations, you need to be able to make sure that you've got the authority to say, this is happening, and I am willing to deprioritize these other business activities in order to prioritize this, because it is a strategic requirement.
There's an interesting sort of subline to what you're saying that I don't know, I'm sort of curious to explore for a minute. Back to when you were building that first red team you didn't know was a red team, one of the first thoughts that hopped in my head is like, damn, how does the Army, or how does any armed forces branch suddenly get like red teaming experience? Like, how did he build a team like that? But the story you told wasn't that, right? It's like, let's start with something basic, get like the first test that is hopefully in line with the capabilities or the experience of what we're expecting from our users, and then started leveraging up sort of on both sides. So Does that resonate with some of the teams you've built since? I mean, are you looking for like the best and the brightest, and are like someone who like really they've been around the world, or do you like how do you build that initial team?
Well, so there are a couple of things that you bring up a very, very important point. So there are three things that I look for when I'm trying to select people for this. And the reason I look for these three things is because I can teach everything else. I can't teach these three things. I can't teach a passion for the domain. I can't teach the ability and willingness to work in a team. And I cannot teach the humility and self-awareness to raise your hand and ask for an adult when you need one. So everything else I can teach you. I can teach you about TCP/IP. I can teach you how to dissect packets. I can teach you about ROP gadgets. I can teach you about the Windows kernel and all that sort of stuff. But I cannot teach you the rest. Those three things. And so where that comes back into is when you have people that are willing to do those things, and you have people that have that set of personality attributes, one of the things that happened with our team on Guam, and you can actually Google this, and that's usually not a good sign, right? If you can Google it. So here's what happened. We set up the red team, and as a good officer, what I did is I made sure that we documented our processes so that it was repeatable. And so one of the things that we said was make sure that when you're advertising, because this is all phishing campaigns, so it was social engineering, which means you're targeting people's hearts and you're targeting people's wallets. And if you can target both at the same time, that's double win because it'll get them to click. My wife was also serving at the time, and we were running something during an exercise, and this is the time when the Air Force was doing a reduction in force on the company grade officers, so people of roughly our rank. And there was a lot of apprehension about who's going to get canned, right? As with any organization, when it's time to reduce the personnel count, right? Find strategic optimizations. So what happened was we created a PowerPoint that looked like it came from the Air Force Personnel Center, and it had the 3 stars name on there who is in charge of Air Force personnel. And then we created an email chain that looked like it came from AFPC and looked like it said, here's who's getting the axe. And then we sent it out to all the company grade officers on the base and said, don't share this with anybody.
Of course, yeah.
And then, of course, buried in there somewhere was discussion about, I don't see anything. They're like, no, you have to enable the macros. That wasn't in the first message. It was like 2 or 3 messages down. And so when you did that, it popped a little dialogue. It did all of its stuff, and then it popped a dialog box saying, cannot read from file or disk. And you hit OK, and it closed PowerPoint. And so there was one person who tried it on their machine, and they got the error, and then they tried it again, and it errored out because it's still, doing its thing. By the time he was done, our logs showed that he had tried it 7 different times from 3 different computers. And he goes to my wife and goes, hey, it's not working on mine. Can I try it on yours? And she's like, I'm pretty sure my husband's phishing. So no, you're not touching my computer. And so then she actually calls me up and she's like, hey, are you phishing? I'm like, I can't tell you. She's like, holds the phone like this. She goes, he's phishing.
I love that. Yeah, everyone has an insider threat problem. I'm sorry, Data. That's a tough one.
But even though she told him that there was an active phishing campaign underway, he still clicked again. He still clicked again.
Yes. And that's where. So I'd love to hear that. So. What is either that, or obviously you can genericize this to make up a word.
Sure.
What does the debrief look for, something like that? Give us some more specifics, because you already said, we can lie, cheat, and steal. That's part of our engagement rules. But I'm going to guess there can be a little bit of defeatism, or just, oh, you cheated, or yeah, you got that one guy. We told him it was phishing, but he kept on clicking. How are we going to get, other than just getting rid of him? What's our technical solution here? And that's what I'm curious how you were delivering the message with a kind but firm message, perhaps.
Right. It is instinctual to giggle about the things that you pull off. But when you're interfacing with your customer, it's important to stick to just the facts, because that almost sterile presentation is going to help give you, one, an air of authenticity, and two, it's going to make it less of an us versus them sort of thing. A lot of folks envision it as being kind of two sides of a table. You've got the people that got owned over here and you've got the red team over here, when really it shouldn't be that. What it should be is you should both be on the same side of the table working together after the fact and saying, this is how we did it. Here's what we should change here. Here's what we should change there. Here's how we make this better. Red teamers are passionate about security. They just expose opportunities for improvement through other means. And let me get back to John, something you touched on. When it comes to, here's a cautionary tale. So I documented all the stuff, all of our procedures and everything, and said, here are some red lines. Do not cross these. So when stuff goes outside of, say, the Air Force network, it needs to have enough self-awareness to identify whether it's on the Air Force network or not. And if it's not, it needs to kill itself. It needs to stop execution, because we don't want to infect anything that is not Air Force property. We don't have authorization to do it.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, think about it. Let's say large Fortune 500 company X does something like this, and their stuff escapes into the wild and starts spreading. They are now liable for that. Even though they didn't intend it, even if they subcontracted out for this, they were acting on behalf of that company. And there is very much a high probability of litigation of some flavor in the future. And they don't want it, and it doesn't serve their end goal. So instead, it is imperative that we make sure that it is specifically targeted and self-contained on both a policy and on a technological side. Because, like I said, you can Google this. One of my successors came in and they built a campaign that was highly effective. They said that the next Transformers movie was being filmed on Guam and they were looking for extras. And I know this will shock you. People forwarded it to everyone. Like everyone on the island got that email. Now, in theory, if things were set up properly, that the implant wouldn't have done anything, even if you click enable macros on a non-Air Force machine. Well, the fact that I'm telling you this should tell you, spoiler, that didn't happen, or does not appear to have happened. And so the Anderson Air Force Base Red Team / Phishing Squad was given its walking papers.
I'm going to use that as a setup, because you've been, I think, very rightly talking about the human psychology of this, both on just how to convince people to click that link, as well as what was the drive improvement through different means, and just turn these into successful campaigns that fix things. There are LLMs these days in AI that don't necessarily that don't have any psychology, obviously. They've just been given a couple prompts and a couple guardrails that maybe will work. Is LLM coming for your red team job these days? How does that what does that change for you?
So LLMs change the speed at which you can do things and the perceived technical capability that you have. So I can do things like it was all handcrafted in small batches on Guam, right? It was all lovingly created. So we did the thing with the CGOs. We did a thing with it was a relatively standard practice right before promotions, about 2 weeks before, that the list would get leaked, so people would know whether or not they made it. That practice has since changed, I'm told, but it was very much a thing, and so people would be very interested in opening up that Excel file to search for their name. And I don't think my senior NCO has ever forgiven me, because her husband was up for promotion and we targeted that demographic, and she's like, I need to let him know. I'm like, you cannot tell him. And when his name showed up and the general looked at it and said, isn't that your husband? She said, yes. But anyway, at the end of the day, it's again, that was all handcrafted, and it was targeted at a specific thing that we knew was happening. LLMs make it so you can make a more convincing setup based on, because LLMs are honestly, they're just regurgitating stuff that they've seen, perhaps with a little bit of different mix-ins, right? It's all still the same Blizzard from McDonald's. You're just changing whether you've got more Snickers or M&Ms or whatever in there. So that the old trope of everything is a remix, LLMs are the pinnacle of everything is a remix. They just have a lot more stuff to remix. And they do it much more quickly. So what's happening is an LLM going to help the red team move faster? Absolutely. Is it going to help them connect the dots more quickly? Yes. Is it going to push the boundaries of what is ethical? Probably. Especially if you've got a red team that is running a local LLM without any of the guardrails. Or they manage to convince their cloud-based LLM, oh no, this is totally for whatever thing. And it goes, okay, and starts helping out.
Right. Yes, I'm writing up a phishing awareness campaign for Cybersecurity Awareness Month. That's a bit silly. Who knows if that works? But that's the spirit, I think, of what you're teasing out there. And I wanted perhaps maybe we'll come back to LLMs in a second. But as we come to the end of the time we have here, is there anything? What would make your job harder? What would give you headaches? Is there a 1-2 defensive things that organizations can do that make it hard for? And I know this is a tough question to answer because I'm being very generic about a red team, but what's that one thing that organizations can try to do other than just not hire you?
Well, so what makes red teams' jobs harder is communication, honestly. If you see it's like in the airports where they say, see something, say something. If organizations do that, like in video games, especially some older ones, as soon as you do something to one of the enemies somewhere, like everybody knows all of a sudden, or in like, say, Grand Theft Auto or those other, or any like role-playing games, as soon as you've offended one person inside of a community, everybody automatically hates you. And similarly, if in an organization, if someone says, hey, I got this phishing thing, and then they push it to security, and security then broadcasts to everyone, hey, there's been an uptick in these things, be on the lookout, then the herd immunity, to leverage some COVID terminology, the herd immunity goes up because awareness has gone up. Because really, like we just started discussing, it's all about psychology. And red teaming and most of the way in which people are getting into things nowadays, you talked about creds, most of the time you're getting cred through social engineering of some fashion. The number of times when social engineering is not involved is decreasing more and more and more, because that's the weak link. You go where the herd is, right? It's still hunter-gatherer stuff. So what makes it hard? Communication.
I like that. I feel that feels like a good way to end, in the sense of, we started about psychology. How are you basically manipulating your targets to get to your goal? And if they just talked to each other, which I'm going to interpret as, here are the groups, here's your incident response team talking to your product security team, having monitoring, observability. I'm going to start going through all the business speak, but that feels like what you're describing that orgs should have, so that that your job becomes harder.
Absolutely. And let me do a quick aside, 30 seconds. There was an organization that I worked with where they did it well. Like, they had data loss prevention, they had a bunch of like monitoring stuff, they had all the things. Their organization is worth a substantial amount of money. And so they had all the tooling, but you can't overcome when an admin does something they shouldn't, or someone with the admin's account does something they shouldn't, because at that point, all guardrails are gone, right? What it looked like someone had done is, using one user's credentials, they had gone in and dumped all of the secrets for that organization. All the the API keys, all of the credentials to be able to do things, everything that runs the CI/CD pipeline, everything, and then exfiltrated it.
Well,
Why and where? It's right, but here's the thing. On the communication side, what happened was one of the other admins saw an indicator of that, and then immediately shot the flare up and said, "Hey, it looks like." They contacted that person and said, "Hey, it looks like your credentials did this. Did you do this?" And they were like, "No." And so they went from there to security, and then security said, "Okay, first thing we're doing, we're rotating all of our keys. Second thing we're doing," right? And so the organization went into lockdown mode to address honestly an existential threat. And so that communication was really, really good.
Yeah, and I think that reminded me. I was reading the news as I was also just preparing for the week, and I'm going to play Mad Libs with this and leave out the names of specific names because I think this is going to be a scenario that repeats itself. But Company A, I'm slightly paraphrasing from their security update. We take security seriously. Company A is not a Company B customer, but it appears that at least one Company A employee signed up for the AI Office suite of Company B using their Company A enterprise account and granted allow all permissions. And this was this weekend that I was reading that, and it sounds almost exactly what you were describing right now. So yeah, I guess your job is going to remain. This feels dismissive to say, but you've got an easy job if you're doing that. I don't know.
So there are two schools of thought on this. There's one school of thought that says the defenders have to be right every time, and the attackers only have to be right once. I
dislike that.
I disagree with that because here's the thing. It's assuming that the game is fair, and the game is not fair. And most people would assume that I mean that the attackers have it easier. Not the case. The defenders control the field you play on. They control the rules. They own the rule set. They enforce the rule set. And so it's kind of like, how is it fair, and it's not supposed to be, how is it fair that the defenders can set up all these traps and have layered defenses and everything else, and the attackers have to thread that Swiss cheese and do it perfectly without getting caught? At the end of the day, if defenders take the mentality of we have the advantage, I think that will change their outlook and that will change their performance.
I was trying to count all the words there because we're coming to the end and we have to ask, as always, describe AppSec in 3 words, or of course, red teaming. So how would you answer that? How would you respond to that, Data?
My answer is love comes first. And the reason I say that, John's giving me kind of the side eye, because if you love what you're doing, if you love the thing that you're supporting, you're going to approach it differently than if it's just a 9 to 5 where you're punching the clock, right? If you're just doing it because it's a thing you're doing, you're going to approach it differently because you love the thing that you're doing. And more importantly, and I know that this is going to stray into some areas that are people like us are characteristically uncomfortable with. If you love what you're doing and you love the customers that you're serving with it, then that changes your whole view space on it and allows you to think about things in a way that you might not otherwise, and bring more of the types of qualities that your AppSec needs to make it a better product.
And I guess that comes back to that passion as well. Be passionate about either you're a great admin on Kubernetes or you're a great expert on packets. Packets. I'm making things up now, but I think I'm just trying to highlight that I appreciate how you were tying all that back together. So thank you very much, Data.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I want to thank John as well and thank everybody for joining us. Do stick around for 2 more recorded interviews from this year's RSAC. We've got one about securing the code made by coding agents, and another one about securing all the agents across your org. And speaking of agents and check out Automation by Compiler Bow. Listen to some music while you're passionate about either red teaming, blue teaming, or some mix of the two. We'll see you next time on Application Security Weekly.
Generative AI is powerful, but it comes with real risks, from prompt injection to data leakage misuse and agentic AI. The OWASP Gen AI Security Project unites a global community of expert practitioners who tackle these challenges every day. Together, they've built practical playbooks, adoption guides, and the OWASP Top 10 for LLMs, resources any team can apply right now to strengthen AI security. And it doesn't stop there. This is open source, built by practitioners, for practitioners, working together to secure generative AI. Visit securityweekly.com/OWASP to use the playbooks and join the effort to protect tomorrow's intelligence today.
Welcome to RSAC 2026. I'm Joshua Marpet, and joining me today is Brian Fox, CTO and co-founder at Sonatype. Brian, thanks for being here. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So this is interesting because we already had a little bit of a talk, and you've given me some fascinating information. I really want to go over this.
Okay.
But I want to start off because not everybody knows what Sonatype is. Do you mind giving us a brief overview of Sonatype? Would that be okay?
Sure. So Sonatype, we're a company, we've been around for 19 years. I'm the co-founder, CTO there. We started early days working on Apache Maven, which is the popular Java build system.
Yeah.
One of the side projects that we have is called Maven Central. It's a little piece of critical infrastructure. All the world's open source Java components are distributed there.
No kidding.
Yeah. So
I didn't even know about that.
Yeah,
Seriously?
seriously. So we carry a big part of the Java ecosystem on our shoulders literally every single day.
Bravo.
We do that. It's not a product. We do that as a service to the community. But it's led to other things that we do. You know, for a long time, we've had Nexus, the repository manager, which is a caching proxy.
Yes, I'm familiar with that.
Right,
Yeah.
and hosting your own internal artifacts. It's not just Java. You know, we do NPM, Python, Ruby, Docker. There's like 30 different formats. So basically, after Maven, all the open source languages and package managers kind of followed a similar package registry model. And so Nexus is sort of your on premise or in the cloud version of that, not only proxying, but also hosting your own stuff.
Okay, that's
so
useful. That's really useful.
Yeah, and that's been around for a long time. We also do software composition analysis to help organizations understand the dependencies that they're using and provide policies and controls and data, security, license, architecture to help them reason about those and kind of govern the developers in the right direction. And then more recently, we've adapted that to be AI native in the new AI world, to take that same data and provide it into AI agents.
Okay, so this is so it's one of the things that I was told was software intelligence to help AI coding tools.
Yes.
That's what you're talking about.
That is.
You're talking. Okay, so how does that work with the AI coding tools? Talk to me.
Right. So out of the box, you know, these models are trained up to a certain point of time.
Right.
Right. And so they're trained on publicly available data. But if the model was released a month ago, it doesn't know about the vulnerabilities yesterday. Doesn't know about
it's got the cutoff. It
doesn't know about that. It doesn't know about new versions of the dependencies. It doesn't know about significant changes. It doesn't know about new vulnerabilities. And so it's kind of locked in a point in time. And so what we've been doing for more than a decade is building data sources to help provide organizations to use that with our tooling to manage that portfolio at scale, right? So we're talking tens of thousands of applications, tens of thousands of developers. Trying to make sure that they're all making good dependency choices is really important and hard to do at scale. It turns out that infrastructure and controls that we put together to do that is exactly what you need to do it when now you're talking about 10,000 agents. Because you know, you can't, when you've got a small team, having everybody understand that we don't use
Here's our style
AGPL,
manual.
right? We don't like these technologies. We can't do this. This is how we handle vulnerabilities. You can do that with a couple people. You can't do it with 1,000 people. You can't even do it with like 20 people, right? And so we were building to manage that. Well, now you have no people, right? And so how does the agent understand? There's no water cooler.
You have
a couple people, but they're not talking about dependencies over a water cooler. I mean, maybe if you're open clawing it, they are, but otherwise, there's none of that information. So we've adapted those data feeds to be able to plug into AI agents via the MCP protocol so that we can ground them in real information.
So you're providing the AI coder with the intelligence about software vulnerabilities, systems, objects, Maven Central, all that kind of thing. so that they have a complete and updated picture of what's going on, what they should be using, what they shouldn't be using, vulnerabilities,
Correct.
whatever,
Right.
and how to do it.
That's right. So when you enter a prompt that says build me a thing, it's not going to pick a version of Spring that's already deprecated, which is like what will happen if you don't, right? And this becomes increasingly important when the definition of developers changes to people who aren't classically trained, that aren't going to think about what are the security implications. They're just saying, hey, build me a thing.
Right.
Well, it's even more important if the AI understands, like, this is dangerous, that's old, this has got a bad license, so let me pick the right things because the human may not know any better. So it becomes even more important in this new future state.
Now, you were telling me something, and you said it was in a new report, but you were saying about they trained AIs to take out hallucinations, which is a brilliant idea, but that all of a sudden they became more cautious. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so we every year we do an annual State of the Software Supply Chain report, and we do a deep dive on these different topics. This year, we published it back in January, and we, of course, focused on AI. And so we were looking at how good are these models at making predictions and these types of things. And so we found that in the early models, they were making up a lot of versions, right? So it was just hallucinating a version, which is, it's fun to laugh at. In a coding agent, it only really wastes a few tokens because it's not going to build, and then it's going to go, oops, here's the right version, and it will fix it.
It could build if you use a deprecated version or
right.
the vulnerability that's not blatantly wrong.
That's right. The made-up versions are less of an issue. I kind of call that like a fail-fast. It's not a persistent risk.
I like that.
When it's making an old recommendation to an old deprecated version, or if it's not fixing a vulnerability, that's persistent risk because it didn't flag a thing, and nobody knows to look at it. And so what we found was that was happening a significant amount of the time. Well, we just this week published updated research where we've done analysis on more recent models. So we've looked at the different OpenAI models, the Anthropic models, and the Gemini over the last year, and we kind of graphed how often they were producing hallucinations. And the good news is it went down.
Okay.
Surprisingly, almost in a straight line when you put the timeline of all those models together.
Almost like they were dialing it down gently.
From 3 different companies, very consistently down. But then when we started looking at how often were the tools recommending no change. So in other words, you ask the tool, hey, do a security audit of all of these dependencies.
Right.
It stopped making up stuff, but it also started saying, hey, 2 thumbs up, you're good, don't do anything.
Was that the right recommendation?
No, it was the wrong recommendation. And what's interesting is in a straight line in the opposite direction, that went up. So it's like what was happening is the models became less aggressive at confidently making stuff up and became much more wishy-washy. And so we did an analysis of how often was that the wrong choice, and it leaves behind significant unpatched vulnerabilities in that case. And worse, it creates a false sense of confidence because somebody might legitimately say, I asked it to do a security review and it said I was good.
And because that's across all the major models, you might get the same answer from all the major models. Like, because we tell people, use different models to cross-check the answers.
Correct. They were interestingly consistent. And to really understand it, you should look at the graph in the report. It makes it much easier to understand what's going on. But what we found is that introducing the information, grounding it in reality, as we call it, with the information that I was talking about that we've been building for scaling enterprises for more than a decade, produces significantly higher, like 300% better results. 300 times better results.
Okay, still very good. It's amazing,
yes.
Actually. Yeah.
And it makes sense when you provide it actual information about real vulnerabilities, real versions, real popularity.
Better information is always better.
That's right. And so providing that back to the model instead of just allowing it to fall back on what it was built on whenever it was built is going to produce obviously better results. And so the trick is getting people to actually combine these things, feed the data in, and then build better software.
Okay, so I've got to say a couple of things. Number one is if you want the report, it's downloadable right now at www.sonatype.com/resources/research/making-AI-work-safely. And no, I'm sorry, I know it's long, but I'm sure you can handle it, okay?
You can find it at sonatype.com.
You can find it at sonatype.com.
Right,
just dig for it. And if not, the web's people, maybe they could put it on the front page. I'm just saying, okay? But
I think it already is.
Good. Go to sonatype.com. Check the front page.
That's right.
Secondly, I've got a question for you. And I said this before, but I'm sticking to this. It's fascinating. they dialed hallucinations down, which is dialing down the imagination, if you think about it, and then it dialed up the caution by accident or as a consequence of that. I find that fascinating because I know you're getting less bad results. I get it.
Yeah.
Less made up stuff, less hallucinations. But you're also not letting it have the imagination to think about what it should and could do. That's fascinating, man.
Well, I mean, if you're asking it for a business proposal, the imagination is important. If you're asking it to recommend a specific real-world dependency upgrade, I don't need imagination in that context.
I'll take that. That's
I don't
valid.
want an imaginative self-driving car either, thinking about all the ways I could go off the road. Like, that's not cool, right? So I think where we're going to have to see these get better is knowing when to be imaginative and when to be really locked down. But either way, if you provide it, and we all know this, if you've been using AI, if you build up the context before you ask the question you're after, you get much better results. Plugging in grounded data via MCP is the same thing. And telling the AI, whenever you're making a dependency recommendation, hit the MCP server for this information, is how that gets done.
So you're providing this development intelligence, a software intelligence across an MCP server.
Correct.
Nice. That makes sense. You're doing it for an AI coding agent.
That's right.
Just hand it. Here's the keys to an MCP server. Go grab everything you need out of there, and then use that to actually perform the tasks that I'm setting you.
That's right. So we've created that. It's called Sonatype guide.sonatype.com. And so there's two pieces. There's a human interface where you can search and find all of the information yourself.
Still useful.
Yeah. And then there's the the APIs, and then the MCP server that exposes the APIs. So you and your chat buddy can both look at the data and decide what the right thing to do is.
We can code in tandem.
That's right.
Sorry, I couldn't resist. So, I mean, you've got a lot of autonomous systems, AI systems doing coding. We've got a lot more, and we talked about the definition of the word developer a little bit ago. And I think that developers are going to be the people that are doing the logical decomposition of the problems, but the LLMs are going to be doing almost all of the coding.
Of course.
And we agree on that. Yeah. And it was interesting. You're like, well, I don't know. And I'm like, they're going to be doing the code. You're like, yeah, that's exactly correct.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, I mean, you were so cautious to say that. Is that because it's an unpopular view, or because you're just very cautious about saying things like that?
No, I mean, what I said was, this is just the new abstraction layer, right? I mean, there was a time when we all were writing assembly code. I mean, that's a little bit before my time, but not much.
No, I did it.
writing all these things, and you get the next layer of abstraction on top of it, and IDEs and refactoring capabilities. I mean, let's be honest. When was the last time every character in the source code was typed in by a human? It was decades ago anyway. So this is a big change, to be clear. But that's kind of how I look at it. It is sort of a big step, but it's an evolutionary step in that regard.
I love the fact that you call it an abstraction layer, because we all know that the hardware abstraction layer. Then there's, when you're encoding, there's, like you said, there's assembler. Then there's compiled languages, interpreted language. There's various levels of abstraction.
Exactly.
And when we think about this, is just, I am giving you the problem and breaking it down for you. I need you to actually write the code. All that is another compiler, if you think about it.
That's right.
Kind of a compiler. I know it's not a compiler.
The language is English.
Oh, wow, dude.
Or frankly, it's not even just English. It's human, I guess, at that point, right? Because it's whatever language you're speaking
natural
to.
language.
Natural language.
That's
really
language
what
we're speaking to them is natural language.
Right.
They process it just like an interpreted or compiled language would.
That's right.
And then bring it down into machine instructions at some level or some layer.
That's right.
I'm stealing that. That is brilliant, man. I love that.
Thank you. That's really all it is, right? So then the developer is really just the human at the end of the day pulling the strings by whatever mechanism that is. And it can be at arm's length, because you see AI-based workflows where agents are just pulling from Jira and implementing it. Well, more or less, something put that Jira in there. It might have been another AI-assisted human at the top, but for the moment, the AI overlords are not making up their own problems to solve outside of the open claw. So who knows where that goes?
They make up some problems in there.
They make up some problems, but for the moment, there's still a person behind the curtain, so to speak, pulling those, and that would be the developer.
That's interesting. I love that. It's another abstraction layer. That was a brilliant synopsis of that whole world. I love that. I do have a question. We're talking about autonomous AI coding agents. And one of the questions that your people put together was about security-sensitive environments. Using your software intelligence, using an AI coding tool, do you think that these are fit for sensitive and secure environments?
Depends on how you use it and what guardrails you put around it.
Right.
Right.
That's
I mean,
And same thing with humans, by the way.
Yes, the answer is it has to be, because how else? Like we if it's a secured, sensitive environment, it means it's really important for humans in one way or another. Whether
Right, life and safety or money or whatever.
right.
Exactly.
And so why would you intentionally choose to make them do battle one hand tied behind their back? You need to be able to empower them as well. And so it comes down to using it responsibly, using it predictably. And that's why we did this research, why we've been doing what we've been doing, to put that information in there. Because look, what I've seen is a lot of people, the industry in general, everybody's rushing to this new thing. Everybody's wanting to do AI.
Oh, yeah.
And what I see time and time again is everybody just throwing out all of the things we've learned about writing good software for 60 plus years.
Yeah.
Things like zero trust, like, oh, what could go wrong if we allow our AI to have everything, right? And it's like the outcome is completely predictable. We know this. The physics haven't changed. And so just because we've added a new abstraction layer doesn't mean that we should throw out all of the good practices about how we do good architecture and all of these types of things. Because it's a little bit harder, the patterns are a little bit different, people haven't been figuring that out. And that's what we're saying. Like, listen, you can actually have your cake and eat it too. You can use these AI tools. You can use the latest models. And you can also feed the information to them so they make better choices up front, so you don't have to rework it, or worse, leave that persistent risk.
Oh, Brian, that's awesome stuff. Brian, thank you for joining us today. To learn more about Sonatype, please visit securityweekly.com/Sonatype RSAC. For full RSAC 2026 coverage from Cyber Risk Alliance, visit securityweekly.com/RSAC. Stick around. We're going to be back after the break.
All right, welcome back. Day 2, RSAC 2026. I'm Doug White. I get the great pleasure this afternoon to talk to Tom Tovar.
Thank you for having me.
Who is the CEO at AppDome, and that is so exciting. I mean, you and I have been talking for a little bit here because we had the chance to speak, and it was really fun.
Thank you.
You are a very, very interesting person and very smart, which made me feel bad, but I will work on that. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
So this one, I read the title, and I read all your questions. I did all my prep on it, but I'm not as knowledgeable, I think, about what you're talking about, and I want to hear more about it because it's very intriguing. But the title was How We Achieve Agentic Outcomes in Cybersecurity, which already was like, okay, that's interesting. But there was a colon.
Yep.
And then we went on and said, the do it for me mobile defense.
Yeah.
And so I'm certainly wanting to hear more about what this means and in terms of agentic. And so I think what it was it's about having agentic start to step in and have more control. Is that fair? Tell me what it means, I think, is the better way to do it.
Yeah, so obviously we're here at RSA right now, and there's a lot of talk about using AI for across the enterprise, and whether it's appropriate to use it in some cases and not others, and whether you need guardrails on it, or how do you provide authorization to agents to access applications, and that sort of, all of which is a great conversation, and there's a lot of wonderful companies that are focused on that. I think there's a separate question, which is how do we leverage agentic technology as a workforce, as a worker, as performing tasks, performing functions, maybe even performing, jobs of the future, whatever those may be. As the threat landscape continues to evolve and the complexity of, enterprise systems continue to evolve, I think just specialized work will be filled in the future by specialized agents that will do that work. So we don't necessarily need to train humans to do that new work. We can leverage agents to do those work and do that task. So the big evolutionary step that I think we're all looking forward to is a notion where we're not looking to maintain a human in the loop. We're looking to elevate the human in the loop to give us more reasoning power, more decisioning, more autonomy over the task, and allow the worker or the agent to perform the task on a daily basis, and maybe even do that more consistently, more continuously, and so forth. So when we talk about moving to agentic outcomes, we're not really talking about using AI to analyze threats or determine, the next emerging attack vector. We're talking about really performing tasks, whether that is adjusting a policy, adjusting a defense posture, doing that in runtime or real time, and taking over something that otherwise a human would have to go access the system and do. It's a scary notion, but I think that's where we're headed.
I mean, do you think that we're still kind of in the churn of that? Because at least that's how I feel. Because I am trying, being an old professor, to adopt. I mean, I love new things.
Yep.
I'm not an early adopter, but I love new things.
Yep.
And I want to use those things.
Yep.
You know, anything I can use to make things better.
Yeah.
I want to use. But I feel like I'm still sort of in the churn of what you're talking about. I haven't established where you said you're going to elevate me.
Yep.
I don't know where I'm going to elevate to. I don't know which floor I'm going to get off on yet.
Yeah, I think it's already happening. I mean, no doubt you probably use some agentic,
Of
tool
course,
in your
absolutely,
own,
yeah.
and you probably have already felt that your own learning curve is accelerated as a result of that.
Agreed.
I think we can all agree that, frontier model makers have, if nothing else, given us a much better search than what we're used to, right? So in the old days, you would go onto Google and you would search for things and you would get a lot of links, and you would click those links and you would read them and try to formulate your own whatever out of it. These days, you enter the query, you enter the prompt into your LLM, you get back an answer. You might challenge it or interrogate it a bit, but overall your learning capacity is improved, your learning curve is improved, your decisioning is improved, and so forth. So I think we're all feeling that today. Some of us are going the next step, and we're starting to say, well, if I have to do research about something, can I just automate that task and have the agent do that for me if that's a normal part of my job? And then others are taking that even further. Can it write code for me? Can I build other more advanced tooling using AI to achieve things? And so you're seeing the enterprise really race at that, really trying to figure out what part of my work ecosystem can I delegate to the machine today, and what does that path look like in the future? So we're very much in the center of the churn. If churn, you mean the butter.
That's
the butter
I just
analogy.
mean the swirl of,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't exactly know where I
Yeah.
exist in this particular
But you know
mess.
it's something.
I do.
Yeah,
And many of the pieces you're talking about, I'm like, well, I'm already doing that.
yeah,
I haven't established trust.
yeah,
I'm facilitating things that I've always done myself.
yeah,
And saying, wow, if I could remove that task,
Yeah.
which is just a boring, repetitive task,
exactly.
I would have so much more time to do this task,
Exactly.
which is a much more interesting thing.
Intellectually challenging, stimulating, fulfilling, whatever. Then
Well, I
agree.
saw it accelerate my class design.
Yeah.
Because, things that I was telling my wife recently, I was going to build a new class
Yeah.
in this firewalling thing. And
Yeah.
in the old days, I just didn't have the time to build this back-end infrastructure to make the class more realistic.
Yeah,
I was focused on this. Well, if I can turn that over to Agentic,
yeah,
I can spend my time on the almost, fantasy part of it to make it seem more realistic to the students, so they're
Yeah.
seeing more what this would look like in the real world.
absolutely. So for example, one of the things that in the technology that I created and our company builds is we took a very discrete function, which was adding security and defense features to mobile applications,
Okay.
which without technology is a very difficult, sophisticated, very boring, hard thing to do.
Right.
It involves a lot of work. It involves a lot of maintenance. Attack surface keeps evolving. The operating system keeps evolving. The device substrate keeps evolving. And so you're constantly maintaining. If you're building it yourself, you're constantly maintaining a tremendous amount of code inside your application and making sure that it runs well and so forth. So now imagine you take that task, that boring, every
Yeah.
day, every moment, task, and you say, I'm going to let a machine do that. I'm going to let a machine build a set of defenses into my mobile application, relieve my engineering team of that burden,
Right.
and I can still validate that those defenses are working. I can still do a pen test. I can still do a dynamic application security
should.
test, and you should, exactly. I can still do that, but ultimately a machine has taken that task over. Now, 10 years ago, when we started this journey, that was revolutionary.
Yeah.
And people were saying, well, wait a minute, I've got 30 engineers and they're the best engineers in the world. And why don't I just let them do this? And I have DevSecOps and I have a loop and so forth, and I've got it all figured out. Fast forward to today, no one says that. Everyone's saying, you know what? we can machine that in. We can let a machine build that for us as long as we maintain the autonomy to check and validate. We can do that. So I think you're going to find that happy ground or that safe ground or that trusted ground. It might start relatively low today, but it will incrementally grow
I
over
agree.
time. And I think we got to be smart in how we do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's sort of where we are, because one of the dangers I always see in these things is just people overstepping it.
Yeah.
Just they come in and they go, do it.
Yeah.
And and I've seen that a different concept than the mobile, but just the same thing with people going to employees and saying, use this, we're tracking how much.
Yeah.
And a personal friend said, I don't really know what they mean by that.
Yeah.
What do they want me to do? Dump all my files into this thing?
Yeah.
And the same thing.
I wouldn't
here.
recommend anybody do that.
I mean, please don't. I mean, how do we start to build the foundations of that in our organization to get that process you're talking about, which I think sounds great? How do we start building that into our process?
Well, I think that's going to become a key part of the cyber function in the future.
Okay.
The cyber function of the future will be, I think, defining that roadmap of delegated autonomy or delegated agentic work, because I do think that will differ depending upon the industry that you're in and the work that you perform and so forth. I do wonder if we as a cyber community can really, I like to say, be the P in front of the locomotive, I mean, in physics terms, I'm sure the P slows down the locomotive, but when you look at it, does it really? I'm a little worried that we might be trying too hard to gate that adoption. I don't think we can gate that adoption. I think what we can do is gate the delegation of tasks and functions. And I think it will differ depending upon, you have organizations today that some have really strong cyber organizations. So the delegated authority might be less. You have others who struggle with finding the right talent or the right people, and they might need more of an agentic workforce. So I think it's going to vary. When I step back and I look at how these frontier model creators talk about the future of AI, there's all these doomsday scenarios, and I think left unchecked or left without a rational evolutionary model, it could get out of hand. But I think that same notion of a rational evolutionary model, if we apply it inside of an enterprise and say, what are the tasks that need to be done, that it really is better if it's done right and done consistently. Okay. And so I look at cyber and I think defense.
Yeah.
Defense is a great place to leverage agentic work, because missing it, getting it wrong, is just too much. Too much.
I think another piece of this that I like a lot about what you're saying is that this also, not everybody has 30 great engineers.
Yeah.
But they're still building components, building apps.
They are.
And like you said, this mobile environment which has always been terrifying to me, because again, I'm old. I was dealing with people sitting in a terminal that never moved from that spot, and I could go turn the keyboard off if I needed to.
Yeah.
But now I got a device that's being carried all over the world, and I have no idea what's touching it. And I'm getting people using apps that were not built by the best engineering team in the world. They were built by two 12-year-olds in New Jersey on a Saturday afternoon. But half my staff is using this.
Yeah.
And it seems to me like this agentic AI component you're talking about builds a kind of floor under this, that if we could make that floor equal across,
and moving up over time.
Oh, absolutely.
To match the threat.
Absolutely, because the floor keeps getting higher, because we can always say, well, that was the old floor.
Yeah.
We've just added two new pieces on top of it.
Exactly.
It suddenly levels that playing field from a security perspective, does allow some of those people to get into my enterprise that I otherwise would say, no, under no circumstances are we using this, but we might be able to trust this somewhat now.
I think you just nailed it. I think that's the perfect analogy for how to think about this. I think that you are going to see today, if I'm a B2B app maker and I want the employee base to use my application in your workplace, you as the cyber person are going to give me a set of requirements.
Right.
And I either meet those or I don't meet those. And if I don't meet those, you're going to tell me, sorry,
No thanks.
can't use it can't use it in my environment. That has, up until the age of AI, those sets of requirements have been largely formulaic, static, not changing. In an age of AI, you're going to see those things move up, and as they do, the developer is going to have to meet those standards, or the IT person is going to have to come in, or the cyber person is going to have to come in and use a technology to raise that application to those standards so that productivity can continue.
And that's what I want to see, because I've seen these situations where you're saying, oh, we got employees downloading 100 apps a day.
Yeah.
And we kind of like the idea because maybe we'll find the new thing. Because if we're just the same as everybody else, we don't have a competitive advantage. And look, and I'm like, you're doomed.
Yeah.
This is like the recipe for giant disaster. But this could set me to that foundation.
Yeah. Now take that same scenario, and turn it to the brand side, the revenue side.
Okay.
The apps that you and I use every day for banking, travel, friends, social media, whatever. All the stuff we interact with where our money's at stake, not the business. Our data's at stake, not the business. And where there's no real standard. It's just whatever the fraud guys throw at you. It's whatever the cyber guys throw at you. And ask yourself, how does an enterprise that isn't leveraging agentic work, how does it keep up with the agentic threat? And you say, oh, okay, there's no way in a B2C mobile application for a set of developers working inside of a brand can keep up doing manual coding with attackers who are using agents to create attacks, to do deepfakes, to do social engineering, etc. So that uncharted territory.
They weren't even keeping up when there wasn't agentic attack.
Exactly.
It was impossible because I've always called this the infinite series problem.
Exactly.
Because I'm a developer.
Yep.
There's an infinite number
of
12-year-old hackers.
Exactly.
And nation states.
Exactly.
And everybody out there, and they have an infinite amount of time to target me. So
you have a finite amount of resources.
Exactly. It was just me. I developed the whole app.
Exactly.
And it's over.
Exactly.
Because there's no way I can combat that.
Exactly. So now imagine you have the power of an infinite workforce in an agentic solution that helps you keep pace with that infinite attacker problem. All of a sudden, okay, my revenues are more protected, my data is more protected, my business is more protected, and I can scale independent of my headcount.
I don't see any way around it.
I don't see any way around it.
No, I mean, so it sounds like you have a model moving forward.
I mean, look, I think you gotta build technologies that produce outcomes and help people. And I think we were talking about this before.
Yeah.
Like, I love being on the good guy side. Like, I just love being on the good guy side. I love being in cyber. I love I think that if we can change the economics of fraud, change the economics of hacking, change the economics of cyber attacks, we can take a big bite out of it. And that's where agentic work and agentic workflows come into play.
Well, obviously we could talk about this the rest of the day and tomorrow. Unfortunately, we don't have that much time, but
I'm glad we had this conversation.
Me too. I enjoyed it very much. Tom, thank you so much for joining us. It's my pleasure. To learn more about AppDome, please visit securityweekly.com/AppDome RSAC. And for all the rest of our RSAC 2026 coverage from Cyber Risk Alliance, please visit securityweekly.com/RSAC.